Okay, so this is going to be chapter 21, the percent chapter in my book, Overcoming Digital SAT Math. Remember, attempt the problems by yourself if you have a copy of this on your own first, and corrections by yourself first before watching this video for any explanations on problems you couldn't figure out how to correct on your own for the best results. And also, always look at the description on these videos. I'll update them as time progresses with like links to other videos and other information that you might find helpful as I find like more stuff or create more videos that pertain to each particular video. Okay, so let's start with number one. What is, 50 is 5% of what number? So 50 is equal to 5% of x. We'll call x that number. We could also say, if we wrote this out as an equation, 50 is equal to the percent as a decimal would be 0.05, because we have to move the decimal 2 to the left, and then multiplied by x, because when you take the percent of a number, you turn the percent to a decimal and multiply by that number, which in this case we don't know what it is, it's x, and we have to solve for it. So all you would need to do is divide each side by 0.05, so you would have 50 divided by 0.05 is equal to x, and when you solve that, you should get that the answer is C, 1,000. Okay, so now let's go to number 2. It says, a company sells mystery bags filled with various items. The company sells 2 types of bags. These smaller bags contain 20% stuffed animals by mass. The larger bags contain 35% of stuffed animals by mass. 60 smaller bags and 40 larger bags contain a total of 150 kilograms of stuffed animals. If X is the mass of each smaller bag and Y is the mass of each larger bag, which of the following could represent this scenario? So we have the smaller bag is 20% stuffed animals by mass, and it's also corresponding to the 60. So these guys match, and then these guys match because they're talking about the larger bags. So we would have to multiply 20% as a decimal, 0.20 or 0.2 times 60, for the smaller bags, which also matches up with x as a variable because that's the mass of each small bag. And when you do 0.2 times 60, you get 12. So we should get 12 times x, like we do right over here. And then you follow that same routine for the larger bags of stuffed animals. So it would be 0.35 times 40 times y, which would give you 14y like we have here. And then when you add those together, you would get the total mass, which is 150 kilograms for those stuffed animals, which we do have right there. So the answer would be A. So now for number 3, we have percent of a number. We're taking 32% of 250. So we have to do 0.32 because we have to turn the percent into a decimal and then multiply by the number we're taking the percent of, which is 250. And then you just put that in your calculator, and when you do, you should get 80 as your answer, B. Okay, now we're on number 4. So we want to, it says 45 is what percent of 30? So for this one, I think it's easiest for most students to set up a proportion. So you're trying to find what percent, what percent of 300? I just realized I said 30. So what percent of 300 is 45? So it would be 45 is the part we're talking about out of the whole 300. And if we're thinking about a percentage, the part that we're being asked about, X, would be the part out of the whole 100%. So it's part over whole equals part over whole. Now we just need to cross multiply and solve for x. So that would be 300 times x is 300x. And then 100 times 45 is going to be 4,500. Now just divide each side by 300 to get x by itself. You also could just say I'm canceling out a 0 on each side and then make it easy on yourself and just say it's 45 divided by 3, which gives you 15. So X would be 15%. So the answer is B. Okay, it says a few years ago, the price of a kilogram of coffee was $10. Now the price of a kilogram of coffee is $15. How much has the price increased? Okay, so it went from $10 to $15. So the change is going to be 5. So the change over the original price, which is 10. So you could do two things for percent change, which is what this is. You also sometimes refer to it as percent increase, percent decrease, same exact thing. You can either change it into a decimal first and then move the decimal 2 to the right. So you could say, okay, 5 over 10, if I divide by 5 on top and bottom, I'm going to get 1/2, that this is equivalent to 1/2, which is just 0.5. And then you could say, I'm going to move the decimal over by 2 and place a 0 in the empty space. So then this is 50%. Or you could say, I'm just going to do 5 over 10, the change over the original amount, times 100, and you would also get the same answer of 50%. So C is the correct answer. Either of those ways works. Okay, so now we're going to use the scatter plot to answer the next two questions. And the scatter plot showing how far John could throw a ball measured in feet at different ages. So these are the ages, and then this is the distance thrown in feet. Which of the following is closest to John's percent change in distance thrown from age 12 to age 18? So let's look at age 12 and then age 18 right over here. So at age 12, that's going to be, each of these is going up by 2. So then that's going to be 26 feet that they can throw. And then over here, that's going to line up with 48. So it's going to be 48 feet that they're throwing. So remember, percent change, it's going to be the change over the original amount, and then you can either move the decimal 2 over or just multiply by 100, whichever you prefer. So the change is going to be 48 minus 26 over, and then the original amount, which is going to be 26, and then most people prefer to times by 100, so I'll just do that. So you're going to plug this into your calculator, so then you should get on top 22 over 26 times 100. And when you plug that in, you should get that this is closest to A, 84.62% increase. Now, you're not going to get that exact value. That's why it says closest. Like, it's like 84.6153, blah, 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 blah. But, like, you have to just round and see, like, which one's closest. That's it. Okay, so now let's go to number 7. So it says, when John turned 18, his coach set a new goal that was 15% higher than his best throw so far. What was his new goal? So remember, at 18, he was throwing the 48 feet. So it's going to be 15% higher than 48 feet. If we're talking about 15% higher, that means that we're talking about all that we originally had, the 48 feet that we originally had, plus whatever 15% of 48 is, which is just the same thing as saying 0.15 times 48. You can do that, or you could say, oh, I know that it's going up by 15%, so I have everything 100%, and then I'm going up by 15%. So that means I need 115% of 48, and then you could just skip to multiplying 1.15 because you move the decimal over by 2, and then multiply that by 48. Both of these are correct, and they'll get you the same exact answer. So let's put that in the calculator. So that gives you 55.2. So it would be C for this one. Okay, so now for number 8, it says, a store originally sold a pair of shoes for $120. In order to quickly sell the last pair of shoes, the store decreased the price of the shoes by 25%. Despite the discount, the store still made a profit of 20% on the pair of shoes. What was the profit that the store made on the pair of shoes? So we just want the profit. So let's start by marking down the shoes first. So it says that they decreased the price of the shoes by 25%. Now there's two ways that you could do this. You could say I have 120 and I'm subtracting 25% of 120. So I'm subtracting 0.25 times 120. Or you can say if I'm decreasing the price by 25%, I'm left with 75% of the original price. And you could say, oh, that's really just going to be 0.75 times 120. Either of those, you're going to get the same exact answer. These are the same exact thing. I'm going to just do this one in my calculator really quick. And that's going to give me 90. Now, it says that they made a profit of 20% on the pair of shoes. So they're selling it right now at the discounted, with the discounted price, or the discount on the original price. And now it's being sold for $90. They're making a profit of 20%. So we would do 20% or 0.20 of 90. So 0.20 times 90, and that would tell us the profit. So when you plug that in, you get 18. $18 is the profit. So it's D. Number 9 says an environmental activist group recently surveyed residents in a city about their recycling habits. Of the residents surveyed, 32% indicated that they recycled their waste regularly. If there are approximately 650,000 residents in the city, how many residents could be or can be estimated to not recycle their waste regularly? So 32% do it regularly. So let's think, what percent do not? Well, 100% is everyone. So if we have 100% and we take away the people that are recycling regularly, then we're going to be left with 68% of people not recycling regularly. So we're talking about 68% of people. So if we want to estimate 68% of 650,000 residents, we would do 0.68 times 650,000. And that would be just equal to D. Okay. Also number 10, I realized I did repeat this on a quiz, and I think I did that on purpose because everyone gets this problem wrong all the time. So I'm gonna actually keep it on here because I think it's a good idea. Most people don't end up actually doing the corrections on their quizzes and stuff. I forget if this comes before the quiz it's on or after. So yeah, I know that this looks familiar. If you have the other chapters, totally fine. You probably forgot about the problem anyway. Still attempt it. So it says, Sophia bought a new scarf at a local store. The store was having a promotion, so she got a 30% discount off the scarf's original price. If the total amount she paid was D dollars, including a 10% sales tax on the discounted price, which of the following expresses the original price of the scarf in terms of D? So let's call the original price, let's call that X. And then remember, D is the total amount that she's paying. So let's write an equation for this situation. So she's getting a 30% discount off the original price. So that means that she's left paying 0.7 or 70%, which is just 0.7 of the original price X. That's with the 30% discount. That's the discounted price. But then she has to pay a 10% sales tax on top of that. So then we are going to say, okay, we can add a 10% of 0.7x, 10% extra of the discounted price she's going to pay. And that equals the total amount she paid, D. Now you'll notice that you see like 1.1s in here. So you can look at the answer choices to help you and say, oh, they probably factored out the 0.7x, because there's a 0.7x here, 0.7x here, and left a 1 in this place, and then a 0.1 in this place, or 0.10, same exact thing. And then that was equal to D. So then when you simplify this, you get 1.1. So it's 0.7x times 1.1 is equal to D. And then remember, we want to find X, the original price, so I have to divide by 0.7 and divide by 1.1 on each side to get X by itself. So I get X is equal to D over 0.7 times 1.1. So the correct answer would be D. Okay, for number 11, it says, in order to create a 45% chlorine solution, how many milliliters of a 50% chlorine solution must be added to 8 milliliters of a 25% chlorine solution? So think of this kind of like part plus part equals whole is how I like to think about these problems. So how many milliliters, let's call that X, of a 50% chlorine solution. So one of the parts is going to be this 50% chlorine solution. 50%, sorry. So I would say, okay, 0.50, 50% as a decimal is 0.50 times X. That's the part that we're talking about there, plus the other part that I'm mixing together, which would be 25%. 0.25 is 25% as a decimal. And then it would be 8 milliliters is the volume. So right here we have the percent times the volume, percent as a decimal obviously times the volume. So part plus part equals the whole thing, which is the 45% chlorine solution that we're creating, which would be 45% as a decimal is 0.45. And then also you have to think the volume, which would be just equivalent to 8 plus X, because like this is the volume of this one, and this is the volume of this one. So if we put it together, we get the total volume of the whole entire like mixed solution, X plus 8. So now you just need to simplify, like multiply out the parts and combine your like terms and everything to solve for X. So let's do that. So we would have 0.5x plus, and then 0.25 or a fourth of 8 is just going to be 2. And then that's equal to 0.45x plus, and then we would do 0.45 times 8. And that would be 3.6. So now I'm going to subtract 0.45x from each side. So then when I subtract 0.45x, I'm just left with 0.05x plus 2. It's supposed to be a plus. Is equal to 3.6. Now I'm going to subtract 2 from each side. I'm kind of running out of space, sorry. And I'm going to get 0.05x is equal to 1.6. Then I have to divide by 0.05 on each side to get x completely by itself. And when I do that, I get x is equal to 32. So that would be my answer. Okay, so now let's go to number 12. Robert bought a laptop marked $1,500, and the store is having a sale of 25% off everything. How much will Robert pay for the laptop, not including sales tax? So the original price is $1,500, but he's not going to pay that. He's paying 25% less than that. So you could think, I'm going to subtract 25% of 1,500 from 1,500, or you could think, oh, if I'm subtracting 25%, I'm keeping 75%, which is the way I prefer to do it. So I'm really looking for 75% of 1,500. So I'm going to just multiply 0.75 times 1,500 to get my answer. And when I do that, I get B, 1,125. So for number 13, it says the difference between a certain number and 15 is equal to 90% of that number. What is the number? So let's call this mystery number X. So the difference between a certain number, difference means subtraction. So the difference between a certain number X and 15. So if we subtract X minus 15, it's equal to 90% of that same number X. So 90% of X we would write as 0.9X. or 0.90x, doesn't matter, same thing. So now I just need to solve for x. So I'm going to, you could not multiply, you could like move the 0.9x to this side if you wanted to first, but I'm going to just go ahead and subtract x instead from each side. But both ways work. So I'm going to subtract x from each side. That cancels it out there. So then I'm left with negative 15 is equal to, what is that? Negative 0.1. I'm going to write it as negative 0.1 just so people don't like mistake it as like a 1 by accident and by not seeing the decimal. So negative 0.1 times x. So now to get x by itself, I have to divide by negative 0.01 on each side. So I have negative 15 over negative 0.1 is equal to x. And then that'll give me my answer. So the answer is 150, which is just D. Okay, so number 14 says a store initially sold a computer for $180. The price was increased by Q% to 225. What is the value of Q? So we have that it's initially being sold for $180. Now remember, percent just means out of 100. So if we wanted to write this as a fraction, it would be Q. That was a terrible Q. It would be Q out of 100 is that as a fraction. So I have 180 as the original price, and then I'm going to add on Q% of 180. So I'm adding on Q over 100 times 180. We usually just do the decimal version because it's easiest when like we have numbers to just move the decimal over by 2. But I think most people would find like multiplying by the fraction easiest here. So that's what we're going to do. Because there's like all weird ways that you can visualize this, I guess, as like a decimal, but it's much easier to just multiply by the fraction version. So basically to find percent of a number, you can multiply by the fraction version of that percent or the decimal version of that percent. Same deal. And when we add that on, we're going to get 225. So now I just need to solve this for Q. So let's do that. So this is going to be 180 plus. Now when I multiply this, I could say that these zeros cancel out. And then I could also say, oh, 2 goes into 18 9 times. It goes into this 5 times. So then I really just have 9/5 times Q is equal to 225. Then I'm going to subtract 180 from each side. And when I subtract 180 from each side, I'm going to have 9, or that looks like a Q. I meant to write a 9. I'm going to have 9/5 times Q is equal to, and then that's going to be 45 right over here. And then now to get Q by itself, I just have to divide by 9/5. Dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal because of keep, change, flip. So I'm really doing this. I'm saying I have 45, which is the same thing as 45 over 1, times 5/9. Now I can cross cancel. I mean, you could put this in a calculator if you want, but I can cross cancel, say 9 goes into 9 one time, it goes into 45 5 times, and then I'm just left with 5 times 5, which is 25. So now let's do number 15. So in 1983, there were about 1,500 bald eagles in the Rocky Mountains. The number of bald eagles in the Rocky Mountains in 2013 was 210% greater than in 1983. Approximately how many bald eagles were in the Rocky Mountains in 2013? So it previously, like the original amount was 1,500, right? So we have 1,500 plus, and then it's going to, that original amount is going to increase by 210%. So we're going to add on, well, that's going to be just 2.10, because we just moved the decimal over by 2 to the left, times 1,500. So that's all you have to do, and then you'll have your answer. So the answer should be C, 4,650.